just can't see the path before me. The melody cries out like a beacon I can hear but can't see. So I know where to go. I find the answers to the questions in my life from the music in my head.
Welcome to the Resilient Insights podcast. I'm your guide on this journey, Joshua Baca, walking you through the intricate world of public policy, leadership, and the lighter side of life. I wanted to start off by thanking everybody who has made the Resilient Insights podcast such a great success. Today is our 10th episode, and I'm very grateful for everyone who has lent time by listening and sharing our content and just being an active participant in the work that we're doing. I'm very grateful for all of the feedback and the positive vibes I've gotten. There's still some small things you can do to help make the Resilient Insights podcast such a huge success. Wherever you listen on audio, be sure to give us a 5-star review. If you're active and watching us on YouTube, give us a like and leave us a comment. Or if you're seeing our content on social media like LinkedIn, like and share it. All of these small things go a long way in expanding the reach of the podcast, which is something that I am working on a daily basis. As a reminder, you could go back and watch our past episodes. We've had a variety of topics that we've covered, from baseball to music to the future of TikTok, carbon border adjustment mechanisms, you name it. We've covered it all over the last 9 episodes. And so we've continued to try to find that balance, public policy, leadership, and the lighter side of life. We're probably lacking a little bit on the leadership side, which is we continue to expand and grow this over the next 10 to 15 episodes will become a much greater focus of ours. I also wanted to thank Randy Charles, who was our previous guest on the Resilient Insights podcast. Randy is from Greenway Steel, and we had a robust discussion and debate over carbon border adjustment mechanism. Randy, thank you for being such a great guest, and thank you for being a good friend. I hope everybody enjoyed that episode. If you haven't listened to it yet, please go back and watch it. It's really an insightful conversation and ties into what we're going to talk about a little bit today. Today's episode is going to focus on the Trump tax cuts enacted in 2017, also known as the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, which made fundamental changes to our tax code, both on the corporate side and on the individual side. These provisions are set to expire in 2026. And as we've seen this year, getting basic things done when it comes to finance and money and budgets and those sorts of things will be really, really difficult. And I anticipate that this will be a tall task, no matter who controls Congress and who wins the White House in November. I think before we get into the politics of this tax cut, it's really important for us to understand what was included. And I'm going to try to run down through some of those provisions. It restructured the tax brackets for individuals, with the highest rate coming down from 39% to 37%. It increased the standard deduction we take when we file our taxes. For individuals, it increased it from $6,000 to $12,000. For families, it increased it from $13,000 to $24,000. And for heads of households, it increased it from $9,000 to $18,000. It eliminated a variety of deductions and, frankly, eliminated most itemized deductions that occur today, made changes to the mortgage interest deduction, put a cap on state and local tax deduction, made changes to the capital gains and dividends tax, the alternative minimum tax. It doubled the child tax credit from $1,000 to $2,000, which is a really popular provision. It doubled the estate tax exemption and repealed the Obamacare tax penalty, which was enacted in 2008, which basically was a tax for individuals who decided not to carry individual tax or individual health insurance at the time. It also made a variety of changes on the business taxes too. It lowered the corporate tax rate from 35% to 21%. At the time, 35% was probably the highest in the industrialized world. So it lowered that from 35% to 21%. It allowed businesses to fully deduct the cost of new investment, repealed the corporate alternative minimum tax, made changes to business interest deduction, and put in place a 20% deduction for pass-through businesses, which is huge for those LLCs and those, S corps and all of those small businesses that really are the backbone of our economy. As you can see, this is by far the most fundamental change we've seen in the tax code in decades. So why does all of this matter? Well, extending them is going to happen amidst the most contentious presidential election of our lifetime. This is the top priority for President Trump to extend and make these tax cuts permanent. President Joe Biden has said that he wouldn't increase taxes on anyone making over $400,000 a year. And so you could already see that there's some differences of opinion that will play out within this. I think that this debate is going to be really critical in the debate over the presidential election. It's going to have massive implications when it comes to the future of manufacturing, competitiveness in the world, and a variety of other topics that are going to dominate the presidential debate. You've heard on this podcast before, competition with China in particular are growing our manufacturing base with some of our guests that we've had on. These are huge topics of debate. And I think we're going to see how the tax code is going to fundamentally shape the future of our country in regards to some of these initiatives. And as the debates take off this election cycle, with the presidential debates happening earlier than in past years, I anticipate that this will be a huge topic of discussion, assuming we could put aside some of the personal stuff that has often played out in many of these debates. The debate is already happening and is taking shape as we currently speak. The House Ways and Means Committee has formulated teams to solicit feedback on how best to reform, extend, and maybe even sunset some provisions in the tax law. The Tax Foundation and other think tanks have outlined proposals and provisions and scenarios on what extending these tax cuts could look like. The Congressional Budget Office has outlined the cost for extending these tax cuts without any changes. And just this morning, I was at an event with Politico where stakeholders had a robust debate around the future of this tax law, showing that the debate is starting earlier than any of us could have anticipated. It shows the importance in the significance of this topic. At Resilient Partners, we see three scenarios playing out. One is really that President Biden wins and the Democrats control Congress. There's probably little incentive for them to extend the tax cut, but rather use the tax code to pass some of their biggest priorities, shape it to generate revenue, and really use it as a means to deal with everything from equity to wages to a variety of other topics that have been a big priority for them. I think that the incentive for them, as I mentioned, to extend it in perpetuity is almost non-existent, but they will need to use a process known as reconciliation, which is jargon here in DC, that basically allows Congress to pass the 60-vote threshold in the Senate and allows them to pass it with a simple majority. The problem with this is you can't extend it forever, which is the problem right now with the Trump tax cuts, which really gives you a 10-year window to do this. So whatever happens, if it happens via a reconciliation process, we're looking at a 10-year window for these reforms to take place. If President Trump wins and Republicans control Congress, I think you'll see a very similar play. Reconciliation to extend, maybe make some changes and some small reforms, but the construct of the tax law will really kind of hold together as we see it be. The third scenario here is that either President Biden or President Trump wins, and we have a divided government here. This will be probably what makes this debate the most difficult of all. It would require some level of compromise, which compromise has become a dirty word, to ensure that there is not an across-the-board tax increase for Americans. At Resilient Partners, we have a really important guiding principle that we use to talk to our clients, to help educate them, to provide, sound strategic advice. And that's being proactive and shaping the public policy environment. And the shaping for tax reform and extending the Trump tax cuts is happening right now. At Resilient Partners, we have a ton of experience having dealt with this. I was at the center of the debate over many of these tax provisions back in 2017. I have all the battle wound scars, and we stand ready to help our clients and future clients and prospective clients navigate this really important debate. And the time for getting things done starts now. It starts with a variety of things that I think kind of come to mind. One is beginning to do your research. Understand what messages are going to resonate with voters and constituents. I think this is really important because the makeup of Congress has changed so dramatically since the last time this debate occurred. The Republican Party has become much more populist. The Democratic Party has become much more progressive, which means that these debates are going to have a much different tone than what we saw in 2017. Doing your message testing is really important. I go back to 2017 and I remember some things that made a huge difference on some small nuances. Tax reform versus tax relief resonated better with voters. Middle income tax reform or middle income tax cuts or low income tax cuts versus tax cuts for corporations always test better. So I think it's really important that you go out there and you test these messages to make sure that they still hold true. The second area I would say is preparing your arguments. That's a really important thing. Do your economic impact studies about what the tax cut law had for you from 2017 to now. Do those analysis, those studies, have those third parties, have those things in place so that you have third-party, independent economic data that helps you bolster your argument and improves the way you communicate when you advocate. The third thing is preparing on the ground. This election cycle is going to be important. Members of Congress and senators are going to be out campaigning all year. Now is your time to get them on the record and understand what their priorities are. Just this morning, Congresswoman Dalbany, who was one of the guests at the Politico event, made it very clear that inserting something like a carbon border adjustment mechanism would be a priority for her as a means to generate revenue. And so making sure that you're organized at the local level is really important at the grassroots level. In the election cycle will pay dividends post-election cycle when you need to mobilize those same advocates and those same voices in the debate when it takes place. The fourth thing is getting organized at the national level, making sure you're organized with your trade associations, your coalition, you have your stakeholders and your partners lined up. Those things are really, really important so that when January comes, you're hitting the ground running right out of the gate, regardless of who wins the election and what the outcome of that is. So I'm fascinated by this debate. I think it's going to be a really contentious and interesting debate. As I mentioned, the parties are very different today than they were a couple of years ago. And so I just think that the way we have traditionally engaged in tax reform or tax cut debate is going to change pretty dramatically. I mean, you have some Republicans who are advocating for maybe increasing the corporate tax cut. You have Democrats and Republicans who both want to extend the child tax credit. Just this year, there was some bipartisan support for a smaller tax package that made its way through the House with overwhelming bipartisan support that has basically lingered and is pretty much dead in the Senate. So my general thinking to you, or my general advice to you, is if you think about this in the most traditional way, you probably aren't going to be successful in shaping the outcome of this debate. With all that being said, please be sure to look us up online at resilientpartners.us. Our website hosts a variety of things, our podcasts, our thought leadership, just ways to engage with us. And I hope you'll give that website a visit. I also just want to conclude and end with another thank you for making the Resilient Insights podcast a huge success. It means a lot to me when people dedicate their time either to listen, I see the metrics, or when you comment or send me a text message. So thank you for doing that. These episodes do take a lot of time and a lot of effort. And, I'm very grateful, not just for the time you've given me and building an audience for this podcast, but the time you've given me as I've working to build a business with Resilient Partners. So I'm going to take some time to reflect and be grateful this Memorial Day weekend. And I hope you do the same. I hope you have a very restful Memorial Day weekend. This will be good content for you to listen on your drives this weekend or wherever you're traveling. So be safe and be sure to go back and catch up on past episodes, which will also be good driving content for you as you travel this Memorial Day weekend. So with all that being said, thank you again. And until next time, please keep on listening.
When I'm lost and I just can't see the path before me,